Morning everyone, and welcome to the first session of the Global Built Environment Conference. Before I hand over to Anthony Bird, our Director of Built Environment, to introduce the conference as a whole, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to move on to the next slide, please. So it is going to be a listen-only webinar. We are recording it so that it will be available on demand later. We're going to be having questions at the end of each session. I'll say more about that in a little while, so do submit questions during each of the sessions. Short Q&A at the end of each one. If you do have any technical difficulties, please submit your issues via the Q&A function as well. That's the function to use if you've got any problems with anything technical. After the event, we will be issuing a feedback survey, so please do complete that for us. And we'll be sending a link to the recording of the webinar to all of the attendees and all of the delegates that signed up as well. It is CPD recognised, so please also request your certificate if you'd like one via the feedback survey following the webinar. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to Ant Bird, our Director of the Built Environment, to introduce the Global Built Environment Conference for 2023. Thanks, over to you, Ant.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 2023 Global Built Environment Conference. For those of us that haven't met before, my name is Ant Bird, and I'm Head of the Built Environment Sector here in BSI. It's my privilege this morning to welcome you all and to say a few words before we move into our conference sessions over the next 2 days. So, where has 2023 gone, and what have we witnessed in the built environment sector? Well, here in the UK, we have seen a year marked by a significant slowdown in the economy. Construction analysts Glenigan, in their last quarterly assessment, suggested that the UK construction continues to be battered by economic headwinds and sudden ad hoc policy change. Slight dig there, I suggest. That said, more latterly, they have acknowledged that sharp falls in construction starts and a challenging set of economic circumstances in 2023, given the peaking of our interest rates, we can expect gradual improvement in market conditions over the next 2 years, and that's truly welcomed. And yes, while new construction starts are generally down, we have started to see increased activity in both the new commercial sector and, of course, the repair and maintenance of our all-important existing stock. The fact remains we typically only replace our existing stock at the rate of about 1% per annum, meaning it is even more important to suitably maintain and, where possible, improve the performance of our existing buildings, but more of that later. And it shouldn't be all doom and gloom. We are still one of the largest sectors, similar in the size in the UK to the healthcare sector, and we are still building buildings and infrastructure too. We represent around 6% of GDP and amount to one of, if not the biggest collective employer around the globe. That said, as part of this important activity, we do need sound and stable policy making from our governments. Where needed, we need clear and meaningful regulations, and of course, and I would say this, the development and maintenance of robust supporting standards, helping to set out and share what good looks like to the built environment sector. Certainly, given my background in building control and as a former government regulator, one of the most important things to happen this year was that we finally saw the coming into force of the new Building Safety Act and a number of its supporting regulations, a direct response to the Grenfell tragedy. It amounts to the largest ever set of building regulatory changes we've seen since World War II, and for good reason. The Act introduces major changes to the regulation of all controlled building work. It creates a category of higher risk buildings, HRBs, which are subject to a new regime during their construction and for residential higher risk buildings throughout their operating life. The Act creates a new and more rigorous regime for planning, design, construction and operation of prescribed classes of buildings, with new planning and building control gateways, accountable persons, safety cases, and a statutory golden thread of information, all linked to a formal certification of the building by the regulator for fitness to occupy. In response to these hugely important regulatory changes, BSI, working with our all-important committee experts and steering group members, have already developed a number of standards in support of the new regulatory regime and for improved fire safety more generally. Perhaps the most high-profile example has been our work on competency. BSI Flex 8670 is a code of practice that sets out the core criteria for building safety in competence frameworks, which is now being turned into a new formal British standard. Sitting beneath this is also a number of additional PAS competence frameworks for principal designers, contractors, and for the management of safety in residential buildings too. Overseeing this activity is our competency committee, CPB1, and they are rather busy at the moment considering what else the sector will now need. The Building Safety Act also contains significant provisions relating to construction products and liabilities relating to defective products, something we are now awaiting the government to respond to following Paul Morell's and Annalise Day's independent review of construction product testing regime that was finally published this year as well. I'd suggest there's much there for the industry to take forward and much for BSI to undertake as well. 2023 also saw the arrival, certainly into the public mainstream, of AI. We all got our hands on ChatGPT and were truly amazed at what it could and on occasion couldn't do. But building upon the built environment's move into digital enablement, we're already seeing commercial AI offerings to assist with achieving compliance with the building regulations. BSI too is also exploring how AI can help with the discoverability and at the very highest level interpretation of our sizable standards portfolio, but more of that another day. Finally, BSI has continued apace in 2023, developing new and revising existing standards in the wider sustainability and low carbon space. The evidence is stark. The built environment contributes around 40% of the UK's total carbon emissions, and that increases considerably when you consider the wider variety of infrastructure installations and their own related emissions. Quite simply, we need to act, whether we're regulated or not. The built environment sector is a major part of the problem when one considers carbon emissions, and therefore it is incumbent upon us to come forward with consensus-based sector solutions. For this reason alone, BSI continues to place a huge focus upon standards and guidance to help facilitate the built environment sector's journey to net zero. This has led to the development of national, regional, and international standards with a focus on construction works, products and materials, building efficiency, and of course, infrastructure. Things that we will return to in our first session very shortly, I promise. But before that, I just want to talk about the actual summit over the next 2 days. Before you there, you have a slide, and we're about to embark upon our first session, Sustaining Sustainable Construction. This afternoon, my colleague Dan Rossiter will be looking at artificial intelligence and small businesses. And then moving into tomorrow, a colleague, Ian Richardson, will be leading a discussion around quality, facilities management and construction products in the morning. And then tomorrow, I will finish the last session on health, safety and well-being, where we will be looking in detail at the new Building Safety Act, the role of competence, and getting an update directly from the Building Safety Regulator on the latest fire safety guidance that will come forward to support national building regs. And we'll be hearing from Professor Steve Denton talking about Generation 2 of the structural Eurocodes. Therefore, all I have left to say on behalf of BSI is thank you. I would like to express our thanks to all our technical committee experts and steering group members who continue to give their time, and quite often their employers' time, so generously to develop our standards, and all those within the industry that took the time this year to comment upon our developing standards. Finally, I wish to thank all of you who have joined our conference today, and hopefully this afternoon and tomorrow too. Here in BSI, we can't do what we do as a national standards body without you. And so if you have an interest in getting more involved in standards making, or if you have an idea of where new standards can help our sector, then we really want to hear from you. Right, that's enough of me. It's time to move into the first session of our conference today, Sustaining Sustainable Construction. Claire, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ant, for that. That's a great scene setting there for the 2 days and for our session on sustainability in the built environment. I'm Claire Price. I'm sector lead in the built environment team, working with Ant, and I'm your chair for today's session. My focus is on sustainability in the built environment, and I've put together a session picking up some key areas that we're involved with. We've got quite a packed agenda, so I'm going to move quickly on to talk you through that. If you don't mind moving to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we've got 3 distinct sessions this morning, looking at energy efficiency retrofit, looking at PAS 2080, and looking at low carbon concrete developments as well. We will have Q&A at the end of each session, 2 speakers in each session, and then a Q&A, and we're expecting them to be around 30 minutes for each of those sessions. So we have energy efficiency retrofit first, and we're going to be joined by Rachel Owens and Alex Baines. Rachel will be talking about the retrofit hub, the new national retrofit hub, and Alex will be talking us through the PAS 2035-2030 standards programme. Next up, we'll have the PAS 2080 session, take up and use by industry. And we'll be joined by Maria Manidaki, Global Technical Lead for Net Zero at McDonald's, and Beatriz Garcia Navarro, Carbon Specialist Technical Services Director at HS2. Maria is going to be looking at systems thinking and resilience. The PAS is now incorporating systems thinking in this new edition that was published this year. And Beatrice will be running through a case study and HS2's experience of using the PAS. Finally, we'll have low carbon concrete developments. I'm joined by Andy Mulholland, Managing Director of Amcrete, who leads the low carbon concrete group that operates out of the ICE. And we'll be joined by Dr. James Aldred as well, who's the technical author of the new BSI Flex 350 for low carbon concrete. Okay, so we're going to move straight on to the first session, and I'll introduce Rachel Owens and Alex Baines. Rachel is the co-director of the National Retrofit Hub. She's also an architect and head of sustainability at Buckley Gray Yeoman. In 2021, she was named a REBA Journal Rising Star for her work in practice to communicate sustainable design, and within Architects Climate Action Network to campaign for regulation of embodied carbon emissions. Alex Baines is head of Building Better at Saint-Gobain Interior Solutions. He's an expert in building physics and renewable energy with a particular focus on human health and comfort and fuel poverty. He's also the chair of the BSI Retrofit Standards Task Group, tasked with identifying and delivering new British standards for retrofit. And he also sits on the PAS 2035 steering group. So I'll hand over to you, Rachel, and then on to Alex, and then we'll have some questions after that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. So, as Claire mentioned, I'm co-director of the National Retrofit Hub, along with my colleague Sarah Edmonds. The hub itself was launched in March this year. Some of you may well have been at that launch event. We're a non-profit collaborative organisation that's really there to try and enable the local delivery of retrofit at scale in line with the National Retrofit Strategy, which I will come back to. We're really there to try and collaborate with everyone in the built environment who's working on retrofit. We want to empower those people to work together, to share their knowledge, to boost their own efforts. And through all that, our aim is to be a really good facilitator and enable good governance of these conversations that happen throughout the industry. So if we want to reach net zero by 2050, there are 28 million homes that need upgrading. And at the moment, we're just not going fast enough. So the National Retrofit Strategy was published by the CLC back in 2021. That set out these 8 core components that needed to be tackled if we're going to scale up retrofit and get it to the pace that we really need it to be at. Off the back of that, we were formed to try and unlock some of the barriers within these 8 different points and try and bring people together to mobilise the industry to create solutions. We want to try and maximise expertise by getting everyone in the room together and by building up our own knowledge. And through that, we want to make sure that we prioritise activities, making sure that we're doing the most impactful work first. And as I mentioned, we're a collaborator and a convener and really welcome anyone that's working on retrofit to get involved. We think it's really important that we talk about energy efficiency retrofit from lots of different perspectives. So obviously it's necessary to reduce emissions and to reduce the energy use of our buildings, but also incredibly important that we talk about creating comfortable, healthy buildings that are really beneficial to the people that dwell within them. The sector also has the potential to create lots of new jobs, drive innovation and growth, and overall contribute to thriving communities. We do work through a series of streams. We have working groups, and I'll go into a lot more detail about those in a minute. We have an advisory panel that's made up of our partners and sponsors, and they're there to help shape our activities and make sure that we're prioritising the right areas. And we're also developing plans for a knowledge base or a knowledge centre, and I'll talk a little bit about what that might look like at the end. We are also developing strategic partnerships, and BSI is a key strategic partnership that we're developing with them. We're also talking to government departments like DLUC and DESNES, and also regional centres for excellence, so Best in Scotland, the Welsh Hub, and different task force. And the idea here is that we really want to make sure we understand what all of these different groups are doing so that we can help to embed that within our own work, and we can share outwards what we're doing and what the industry is doing around retrofit. What we want to avoid is doing the same work over and over again, but we also want to make sure that there's visibility about action that's going on in the sector. Alongside our strategic partnerships, we also have partners who are non-profit organisations that support us, and we have sponsors who are commercial organisations that sponsor us. So these are our 6 different working groups. I'll do a very brief overview here, and then I'm going to talk about the progress that each of these have made up till now. So working group 1 was originally called Standards. It's now called Warm, Healthy Net Zero. It's really about the what. What do we need to do to homes and buildings to get them up to the standards that we need in the UK? It's looking at design guidance, but also quality assurance, information and data that we hold on buildings and how that can be leveraged to allow scale up and clustering of projects. Working group 2 is techniques and technologies. So this is looking at the supply chain, the materials that we need, but also the tech. Working group 3, workforce growth and skills. They're looking at everything from what are the existing skills available now in the industry, what courses are available, what's the pipeline into retrofit like, how do we make this a really good job that people want to go into and want to stay within. Group 4 is on finance. How do we pay for all of this? Looking at different sort of funding mechanisms that are currently out there and ones that are emerging. Working group 5 is all about delivery. So how are we delivering retrofit right now, at what scale, and how can we improve that? And then working group 6 is all about engaging with the public. How do we make people want retrofit? How do we create this connection between your home, your energy bills, your health and comfort, and also the energy performance of your home? So, working group 1, we originally set out with a mandate to start developing tools and guidance that would enable large-scale retrofit projects to happen. We wanted to enable access to open source data so that we can have really informed decision making, and we want to foster collaboration around this data exchange. And part of that includes how there might be strategies for combining projects together and clustering so that we get some economies of scale. The group identified these 4 key questions. what is the home or the building and what target should it be aiming for? How can you map or decide what's needed? What are the measures and how do you identify them? How can you be confident the work will be done well? How do the current QA schemes work at the moment, and who's using them? How do you manage unintended consequences? And how do you know that the building will perform as promised? So thinking about how we capture data on that and do BPE. And this started to pull together a series of different topics that the group wanted to focus on in more detail. And we started to visualize these in a glossary. So there's a little bit missing at the bottom of the screen, but you can see that largely the framework here is that we've got a framework for clustering and how we access the data on the left. We've got archetypal guidance sort of at the start, seen in the center of all of this. How do you sort of start to approach a building and sort of imagine what you might be able to do to it? And then more detailed design guidance and pattern books and how they all feed together. These things all link to quality assurance and building passports, and now our thinking is starting to develop. We're really understanding that the information that we hold on a building, whether that's through a logbook or a passport or another data centre, is really key to be able to understand what measures are applicable, what design guidance you need, the larger structure of the data that we hold on all of the housing stock, and how you apply quality assurance methods. So these are 4 different task and finish groups that we're currently starting to run, where we're looking to provide frameworks and guidance that allow interoperability and standardization between some of these outputs that people in the industry are making. Working group 2, techniques and technologies. We've held 1 meeting so far with this group with a variety of speakers. John and Diane talked about the supplier sustainability survey, attitudes that merchants, that installers and the suppliers have on supplying more sustainable products. We also had Stephen talking from Knauf's perspective about growing their supply chain. That was really interesting because one of the key takeaways for me was that Knauf have really been able to grow their supply chain because of the regulation that's coming out on new homes, so the future building standards, and they've been able to use that as a reason to grow. But what they're saying is there's nothing necessarily within the retrofit sphere that is allowing them enough evidence to grow their supply chain. So that's a sort of key lever that we can all start to sort of think about and focus on. Megan and Lee talked about the supply chain. They're both from Travis Perkins, identifying what the barriers and opportunities in the supply chain were. And then Ben from the SEA introduced their report, which I'd really recommend you all reading, A Technology Agnostic Approach to Heat and Buildings Policy. This group's identified some potential outputs, so potentially a supply chain picture. How does the supply chain currently work? Where are the bottlenecks and inefficiencies? How can we allow that to work more smoothly to scale up retrofit? Potentially a forecasting and future-proofing report. If we know what targets our homes need to meet, then what products do we need to get there? And can we start to map that and understand where we need growth? Tech adoption case studies, making it more apparent what technology is out there, and all of that's going to feed into our knowledge sharing. Working group 3 is on workforce growth and skills, and as I mentioned, what they're trying to do is map the whole of the skills sector and understand where change can be made. So they're looking at everything from how do you get into the sector, what's the role of private purchase segments, those RMI builders, to influence change, how can public procurement shift some of these barriers. So that's going to be a big piece of research that will be presented to the group at the end of January, and we'll then have some really clear outputs that will come off the back of that. So if you're interested in that, please join Working Group 3 and you'll see all of that in a lot more detail. Working Group 4 is on finance. That's jointly hosted by Bankers for Net Zero, the Green Finance Institute and the Grantham Institute at the LSE. The aim of this group is really to share information about the mobilisation of finance, to develop a shared understanding of what issues and challenges there are. We've been looking at sort of what current financial products are out there and how do they work, who are they appealing to, what policy change might the financial sector need, are there specific incentives for consumers that would work well, but also this role of the bank as this trusted high street presence and how upskilling people within banks could support customers on their retrofit journey. We've also recently hosted a roundtable between retrofit organisations and finance providers to try and unlock some of the sort of disconnect between the two, and we'll be publishing a paper on that within the next week. Working Group 5 is mapping the current delivery models that exist, so from the grant-funded owner-occupier to the SHDF and the public-funded social housing to the privately financed and one-stop shops. What we're trying to do here is really understand how the existing delivery models work across the customer journey, and this is where we've started. We're being inspired by what's happening abroad, so looking at the Irish National Retrofitting Scheme, for example, and really trying to understand how do these different routes work for each part in the journey. Where do they work well? Where are the blockers? What could be improved? And what can we learn from one delivery model to improve others? And then finally, Working Group 6 has just launched. This group really wants to embed retrofit knowledge and understanding across all processes and interactions within the home improvement sphere. So when you're moving home, when your children move out, when you're having an extension, they're all key trigger points where you might also consider retrofit. And what we need for that is to engage with the RMI sector, but also create a general mindset within the public. This group's also going to look at how we can empower community organisations, such as the ones that already exist and those that are emerging, to support members of the community to engage with retrofit. We're looking at a state of the nation. There's lots of research already on consumer attitudes towards retrofit, doing a bit of a literature review of what that looks like, thinking about how we can promote retrofit through educational materials, whether there are any policy recommendations that would help to promote retrofit, and then, as I mentioned, supporting those community groups to grow and develop, because they're a really key place to provide hands-on guidance and also a trusted, supportive place within the community that helps people access this. And then finally, we're developing plans for a knowledge centre. So this will be an online platform where you can access any information about retrofit. It's going to be signposting to lots of the great resources that are already out there from people like the BSI, the AECB, the UK GBC, the Passive House Trust, but also it will be a place where we help to find gaps in the knowledge. We've done a lot of surveys to try and understand where there is missing information, and our groups are starting to work to fill that. So that's something that's going to be emerging next year. So all that's left to say really is that we'd really love you to get involved. If you'd like to, you can go on our website. You can suggest that you're interested in becoming a partner or sponsor. You can sign up to a working group. I'll put the link to the website in the chat, and thank you very much. I'll hand over to Alex.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, all. I'm Alex Baines, and I'm here really as the chair of the British Standards Institute's Retrofit Standards Task Group, just to outline the Retrofit Standards Framework Programme. Now, just to put it all into context, the challenge, as we all know, is very significant. And over the next 3 decades, as we've got here, we must deliver at least 5 retrofits per minute on average. And the cost of that is evidently very significant. The estimations are, as you can see, quite high. And as a result, we have neither the time nor the money to get it wrong and do it all again. The problem is that retrofit is risky, and we've seen this over many years. It's predominantly significant issues in design and installation or misunderstanding of the buildings, ill consideration of that retrofit, the issues that we have from moisture, etc. And even though industry has made significant advances over many years, we still see constant impacts every day around us from failures within retrofit or failures within or misunderstandings within industry at times. And it was back in 2015 when the government launched their first review, the Bonfield Review, which led into the Each Home Counts report, that significant changes started to be made in our industry in this area. That report outlined 27 recommendations, of which there were 3 specific recommendations that were focused on standards and developing a framework of standards so that we could all work and deliver what was required for the occupants and for all of us at home and at work and anywhere else that was impacted by buildings. The Retrofit Standards Task Group was set up to address the standards, and it started out by addressing research and looking at what there was, and it's a similar piece of work that is being undertaken as we've just seen with the National Retrofit Hub, who are now taking on and furthering that information. The framework itself that was developed following that initial review turned into what we now know today as PAS 2035, PAS 2030. And we have in place Trustmark, who look after this side of it and who administrate to a certain degree. But as we can see here, they are there for the quality mark, supported by the Code of Conduct for retrofit installers and the Customer Charter. That is effectively that top level assurance for the occupant and the building owner. Underneath this, we have the overarching process and risk management standards. And it's quite important to understand that it is risk management. It is not necessarily building performance. It is in certain way, but not energy performance. A lot of people look at it. Energy performance standards should be considered differently. This is about the management of risk of doing any retrofit. And this is where you have PAS 2038 for non-domestic buildings, PAS 2035 for domestic buildings. The bottom row of the diagram shows examples of the British standards and the non-British standards that are referred to by PAS 2035 and 2038, with which they require compliance. So 2038 and 2035 encompass other standards to show what needs to be done and brings them together. And there is constant development on this side, and we'll touch base on that in a minute. This is all administrated in terms of the new standards from BSI with BSI's retrofit committee, CB401, which also form part of that framework. The real understanding in here is that the requirement to minimize risks and the provision of these robust processes for those owners, those occupiers, those designers, and those installers. It's because, as I already mentioned, that most retrofit risks are moisture related and have time-consuming and expensive consequences if they're not well managed. And the PAS standards are designed to help the project teams manage those risks and to protect the buildings and their occupants' health against the unintended consequences of poor retrofit. The professionalization of retrofit, which is sort of a new type of work involving new materials, new products, new systems, new processes, and requiring potentially new skills. The capacity of the retrofit industry at the moment is inadequate and not necessarily well founded on proven techniques developed by the original pioneers that we had prior to the Each Home Counts review. That's where these standards define that good practice and bring that to all of us. It allows us to identify routes to zero carbon. Every building is unique. One solution for one building may not be the same solution for the building next door, even though they may look the same. And the retrofit standards require retrofit assessments, improvement option evaluations, medium-term improvement plans. And those PAS standards raise the client's expectations. They identify a stream of work for our industry, and they help us to discern and follow appropriate retrofit paths. The explicit definition of intended project outcomes and holding retrofit project teams to account by evaluating delivery. It discourages project teams from following what was previously possibly considered as usual or occasionally lazy or inappropriate practice, as well as identified in the original Each Home Counts report. And as we've said, we've got insufficient time and resources to deliver poor retrofit and then go around putting it right again. So we need to get it right first time. And for that, that's why we have these standards. The restoration and maintenance of the confidence in clients and the government. It was at an all-time low in 2015 following many failures. And that is again why these standards are in place and are so crucial to us. And we will have, and we do have, this continuing improvement. Just this year, But in fact, just in September, we had the latest updates to PAS 2035 and PAS 2030. PAS 2030 is the installer standard that's referred to by PAS 2035. This is where we currently are. And as we now look forward, and we look forward to the key items for next year, there are three key areas. There is the allowance or the ability to bring in innovation quicker into the market so that we can meet our requirements. BSI have a strong innovation team and development on the stands on that side, and working with UKR Research and Innovation, Innovate UK, as to how we can get that innovation to move through the systems quicker. That is one of the key targets for this year. There are further amendments coming. We have the regular amendments, and as part of this, one of the key areas for a regular amendment this year is the scaling and the routes into PAS, and making sure that we can open the PAS and make it easier to get into and to bring everyone on this journey for delivering what is needed. But in order to do that, we also need to deliver the competency. The competency is crucial, as we've seen and we heard from the opening discussion, and we'll hear more over the next couple of days from the building safety regulator, the health and safety executive. We're also working quite closely with IFATE, who are responsible for the apprenticeship standards, and also on the national occupational standards, which define the education for installers and others within the retrofit industry, so that we can get an alignment across all of the England and the devolved nations to make sure that we can all deliver what is required for the occupant and for ourselves and our families. Because what we need to do is to make sure that we have that trust for everyone in the industry. And that is developed through this task group, working with the BSI committee, with the CB401, making sure that we've got that industry alignment, the competency that we've discussed, bringing in the ability to ensure that verification is at the appropriate level, whilst allowing those advances in technology and the scale up and optimization that we need within this industry to deliver to the timescales that we're talking about. As part of that, BS 40104, which is a retrofit assessment side, that will also be brought forward this year, be released this year. The crucial thing is that every building is different, and there is often a wish or a want to apply a single strategy to everything in an environment. The Each Home Counts report outlined the concerns with that, and there is a recent BSI paper that was authored by Dr. Peter Rickaby on the importance of standards for safe energy retrofit that you can go into a lot more detail and understanding for why we have these standards and where they need to go. So I would ask people to have a look at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and both of you for that. And yes, switch your cameras on. That's great. So, gosh, so much going on, but seemingly so much still to do. I think we've got time for a couple of questions. One that came in was, how will industry scale up to the massive requirements for retrofitting British housing stock to meet net zero targets? Now, it strikes me that there is so much happening. So perhaps, is there something we can really pick out? Perhaps turning to you first, Rachel, out of all of the activities and all of these initiatives that are taking place, you know, is there one particular area that will really help us to scale up to what's required?
Well, I think our view is that, and the reason we have so many working groups is that there are quite a lot of pieces of the puzzle that need to move forward together. So often people sort of look at one another and say, yes, well, maybe the delivery side could increase if we had more finance, or maybe the financial products would increase if we had more skills to apply them, or maybe we would have more skills if we had better competence. But I think we see it as that there are multiple strands that all kind of need to be pushed forward at once so that we can get over those barriers. And I think the most important thing is that people with expertise work on the thing that they know about. And I think that's kind of the power of the hub, is that we bring people in like Alex, who is a member of a few of our working groups, to share their knowledge in that specific field. So I think, you know, our big message is the more we can collaborate with one another, the more we'll unlock this, and being open about what we share is really key.
Yes, thank you, and we're very pleased to be part of the hub as well. Alex, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what Rachel is absolutely right. I think that's, as an industry, that is what we need to do. I think the element that could be brought forward, if there was one item to actually bring forward, and this would apply to anyone who's building owners or asset managers and the like, is to get assessments done, to know what you've got. As soon as you know what you've got, and as soon as the industry knows what we've got, we then know which areas we need to focus on more and more. We know that we've got lots of buildings, but we don't know what's happened to all those buildings over the hundreds of years and potentially that they've been lived in. And so the ability to get that information, that data that was outlined by Rachel from some of the earlier working groups of 1 and 2 to a certain degree, that is crucial. The more that we have that understanding of what there is, the more that manufacturers can work on specific solutions, the more we can make sure the expertise is where it needs to be. There are different typologies of buildings in different areas of the countries as well. So in those areas, we can make sure that the specialists have the right knowledge for those areas and that it works so that we can deliver the right thing at the right time, at the right speed. We can make sure that training is in the right place, because a one-size-fits-all doesn't work in retrofit. It's been proven not to work in retrofit. So the more information that can be gathered at the outset, the better the end game will be. And that is what is opening up. That's where the discussions are, even through to the finance, the assurance, the building warranties, building guarantees. It depends upon what we start with. So the call would be to get that understanding of what there is to start with.
Yes, assessment's so important. And really quickly, because I do want to move on. A question has come in: views on heat pumps versus insulation. Do you think that one is better than another, or we should just?
We have a lot of discussions about this, as you might expect, and it very much depends on what are you trying to get, what's your outcome, and what's the home like. If your outcome is that you want to decarbonise your home, then heat pumps are a fantastic way of doing that. But if there are complexities such as, you know, you really care about if your fuel bills might go up, your home might not perform that well thermally, then there are different balance. There's a balance to the mixture. So, you know, there are a number of homes that are suitable for heat pumps to be installed within them. You might need to upsize your radiators, but there are many more that will probably benefit from upgraded insulation and ventilation before that heat pump's installed, so that you can protect yourself against potentially having slightly higher energy bills. So I think it really depends on the home and the occupant, and I think those two things are really key to understand. I'm sure, Alex, you've got some more detailed thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, it's interesting. It depends upon what our targets are and where we're trying to get to. There are challenges within the electricity delivery supply, potentially, as we look at this, the fact that we're also switching a lot to electric cars. There is no doubt that that is one of the key areas in which to go. However, also what we have at the moment is the requirement to do upgrades to the building before we're doing an install in terms of an SLC pump or any form of heat pump at the moment, to make sure that the building is at the right level for it. So you have to do that, and at the moment it is that consideration of, is the choice of what we're doing to upgrade to achieve the ability to install a heat pump under funding, is that the right choice for the building and the occupants as well? So it's about getting what is right, because what we don't want to do is to have a methodology which means that people suddenly go 5 years, 8 years time, actually part of my upgrade path, I've got to take something out, and that makes no sense. So it comes back to that original planning, is yes, absolutely we want heat pumps, yes, absolutely we want insulation, we want buildings to be better, but we don't want them to be causing a risk to one another. And so it is managing those aspects and that approach.
its assessment and understanding the buildings. Once again, I think that message is quite clear. All right, well, I think I'll draw that to a close. Thank you both very much for your contributions this morning. And we'll speak again. Look forward to working with you both in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on now to our session 2, PAS 2080, take up and use by industry. PAS 2080, carbon management in buildings and infrastructure. It's a new edition was published this year in the spring. There's an enormous amount of interest in this standard, a huge number, very high number of downloads as well, and we know it's been taken up and used. It's changed quite a lot since the first version in 2016, so we're going to be exploring that a little bit this morning. We do have plans to elevate it to ISO level to make it a formal international standard. And there is certification around this standard as well. BSI also does a verification service to PAS 2080. So let me introduce our 2 speakers. We have Maria Manidaki, who's going to be talking about the systems challenge first. She's Mott MacDonald's global technical lead for net zero. She has led a number of strategic decarbonisation projects in infrastructure, including the Water UK Net Zero Carbon Roadmap. She's a member of the Green Construction Board in the UK and one of the technical authors for PAS 2080-2023. Also a technical advisor on net zero in a number of industry forums, including the ICE's Carbon Project. And she'll be followed by Beatrice Garcia Navarro, who'll be running through a PAS 2080 case study for us. Beatrice is a carbon manager in the environment team in High Speed 2 Limited, trained as a civil engineer and experienced in the delivery of major infrastructure projects. She focuses in maintaining and enhancing environment and sustainability. Beatrice's inspirations reside in challenging the status quo in construction projects for a cleaner, healthier and more sustainable built environment for all. So over to you, Maria, and then straight on to Beatrice after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. Hi, everyone. As Claire said, I'm Maria Manidaki, and today I just want to give you a quick overview of the PAS 2080 update and focusing a little bit more on the systems challenge and decarbonization. Quite a complex issue, I would say. We don't have all the answers yet, but the PAS makes a very good start on this. Yeah, if we can go to the presentation, please. And the next one, please. Thank you. So just as a summary, really, you can see on the right-hand side the 2 documents we published in the update in April 2023. But essentially, for those of you who are not very familiar with PAS 2080, it is a management specification for managing whole life carbon in buildings and infrastructure. The focus is about managing emissions, reducing emissions, basically. It's not about quantifying emissions, although the PAS does have some assessment principles for the assessment or quantification of emissions, but the focus is on the management for reductions. It is about aligning the objectives for decarbonization in different parts of the value chain, from asset owners, designers, constructors, product material suppliers. And the revision this year also has some informative guidance for government, regulators, investors, local authorities, other developers, because we understand that they're very, very important for decarbonization. The focus of PAS 2080 and the guidance document that you can see and freely download in the links on the right-hand side has been the decision making. So instead of being a technical, if you like, standard, is about understanding how the different components of the PAS 2080 carbon management process essentially help us make the right decisions when it comes to decarbonization. Next slide, please. If we were to put PAS 2080 on a page, this is the main carbon management process you will find in the PAS. And essentially what it says is that with the right leadership in any organization across the value chain and having the right target setting and the baseline, these targets can be net zero targets, can be all sorts of decarbonization targets, then we go through a process throughout the delivery process, an iterative process where we have to assess emissions, we have to monitor progress against the baseline to see how well we're doing on the targets. We need to have the right instruments in our procurement process, and this is quite a new area in this PAS revision, the procurement requirements for decarbonization. We need to have a continual improvement process that everyone is following, being on data, on maturity, on low carbon innovations. But the essence is about how do we integrate all the different components of the carbon management process into all work stages, by challenging each other constantly when we're delivering a project, and having the right governance processes, systems, and collaboration behaviors, if you like, to achieve decarbonization. As Claire mentioned, an organization can also achieve claims of conformity, can be verified according to PAS 2080, which is good, but this is not actually the essential bit. It's not about the tick box, yeah? It's about improving our maturity. So PAS 2080, the revision, is centered around 5 decarbonization principles. Systems thinking is one, which I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail today. It's about trying to really push and follow the carbon reduction hierarchy throughout all the work stages, meaning avoiding building things, switching to alternative low carbon technologies, materials, energy sources, and improve by focusing on improvement methods for detailed design, for construction, for operation. As part of the systems thinking, the PAS also focuses on prioritizing nature and biodiversity net gain in the solutions, and not only looking at carbon as one of the criterion, including resilience considerations. And all this can happen through kind of meaningful collaboration at different stages. So this is the PAS on a page. If we can move to the next slide now. So what I wanted to talk about today is to give an introduction of the systems thinking in PAS 2080. So one of the things, you see this from this is a diagram from PAS 2080. On the right hand side, you see essentially how the PAS recognizes there is a nested relationship between assets, networks, and systems, and then systems of systems. It also recognizes that historically we have been focusing our decarbonization efforts at the asset level, and because we have a little bit more certainty on the emissions we can control. If you look on the left hand side, there are the different value chain members responsible for directly controlling or influencing emissions at the different levels. So an asset can be a building, can be a bridge, can be a pumping station, a network, can be the railway system or a development, or the transport sector, the water sector. A system can be a geographical system, or can be the country as a whole, or can be the wider transport system in the UK, for example. And the focus of the PAS is basically saying that in order to achieve those deep decarbonization efforts, we cannot really look only at the asset level emissions. We cannot keep trying to reduce carbon, meaning capital, operational, or user carbon at the asset level. We need to make sure we understand how this asset forms part of a wider network, and how different interventions in the wider system could actually accelerate the decarbonization efforts at this asset, whether it's the right asset to build, whether we need to build this asset to facilitate decarbonization in the wider system, like in the case of hydrogen, for example, or exporting waste heat in the wider network, and what are the responsibilities for directly controlling and influencing those emissions at the different levels that you see from the value chain on the left-hand side. One of the things the PAS actually emphasizes is that Another reason why we haven't been able to look at decarbonization at the system level, or more systemically actually in general, is because we keep operating in silos. So for example, I'm a developer of a building. I may not always, when I plan my building or buildings, engage with other asset owners in the wider system to understand, how are people going to come into the development, or what increase or strengthening in the electricity system I may need as a result of this development. The same for a water operator or a water asset owner. What are the synergies I need to understand in the system in terms of electricity grid, if I want to be implementing embedded generation from renewables? Is the network sufficiently strong and big enough, has the right capacity in order for me to do that? How is regulation fitting into that? So all these questions, the PAS is trying to encourage people to avoid operating in silos, as we have been doing, and start asking practical questions. And you have many case studies in the guidance document of how we start looking at our project or program of work in the wider context of a network or a system. As part of the systems thinking, targets is a key point. So the technical author team and the industry, actually the stakeholders in the PAS 2080, we recognize that there are many projects at the asset level that have a net zero target. This could be a good thing, but may not be the right thing if you look at it from a systems level, because you may actually prevent the efforts being on achieving deep reductions and focusing of how am I going to offset any residual emissions at the project boundary. So it's very important to really understand what are the wider system level targets, if any. So for example, does a city have a net zero commitment or a target in London, in Manchester, or a geographical region? And if so, how can those be translated into the different interventions in the system? Could be in any sector. And this is when the PAS starts talking around net zero targets, carbon budgets at the system level. It's quite a complex field to navigate, but we need to start from somewhere. So yeah, targets and decarbonization and focusing the right efforts at the right level, being asset network system, is key in the PAS. If we go to the next one, please. This is figure 4 from PAS 2080, and it gives a more practical examples of how we all need to manage whole life emissions, and what are the emissions we need to be aware of when delivering projects and programs of work to make the right decisions and achieve deeper carbon reductions. So this diagram is all about trying to look beyond the project boundary we're looking at from an emissions point of view. So you can look at this diagram in 2 ways, 2 dimensions. If we split it on left and right, so we have the left-hand side are the emissions that we are looking at within a project boundary that we have. Can be any project at any level in the network, in the asset, or at the system level. And all the emissions that the PAS says that we need to manage and map are capital emissions, operational emissions, and user emissions. Also, we need to start looking at any removals opportunities, so the carbon to sequester within the project boundary, if there are any opportunities to do so from nature-based solutions or other technological innovations. However, the PAS recognizes that once we plan a project, we need to also look beyond our project boundary, and this is on the right-hand side. These are all the emissions impacts or reduction opportunities at the beginning of a project that we need to start mapping and understanding whether, for example, there are any unintended consequences in a linear project beyond our project boundaries, where we, for example, disturb land and you have unintended consequences of emissions in the atmosphere from disturbing peat, for example, before you start restoring it. What is that carbon balance? Are there any opportunities for reducing carbon beyond the project boundary by promoting for example, hydrogen I mentioned earlier, or exporting power or heat, or reducing the demand for something for transport, for water. These are very important to start acknowledging at the beginning of the project. And these are emissions that within the project boundary that the team in the value chain has a more direct level of control. But beyond the project boundary may be emissions that we only have some influence. So it's important to engage with the right stakeholders early, even if we don't have all the data and the calculations available to make the most accurate decision. If we go to the next one, please. This is a case study in the guidance document for PAS 2080 that you can freely download from the Institution of Civil Engineers website. It basically illustrates the point of using a systems lens in urban planning. This is a classic case study about urbanization and how looking at different ways in urban planning you can actually result in lower carbon emissions for the users of a city. There are two similar size cities, Atlanta versus Barcelona, you will see here, and you see the difference in the actual per capita carbon footprint is almost 6-7 times, Barcelona having a much lower per capita carbon footprint per inhabitant. Why is that? Because the urban planning design and the planning and design in these two cities has been very, very different, and the density, the densification has been very different. Barcelona has got a much denser way of inhabiting people in blocks of flats alongside efficient transport corridors, whereas Atlanta is more about the big actually detached houses with plots and not very good public transport system. So that means people have to move a lot more in Atlanta than in Barcelona. So what that shows that from a systems perspective, you could have some really good outcomes for decarbonization as well as other co-benefits basically. And this is a case study. You can have a look at the guidance document. If you go to the next one, please. Another way the PAS is looking at systems and looking at bottom-up, if you like, approach is how individual assets can unlock wider system benefits for decarbonization, resilience, promoting biodiversity and other benefits. This is when an asset need has been confirmed from different drivers and the efforts to reduce whole life carbon at the asset, but looking beyond the project boundary can bring different benefits to the wider system. The guidance document lists a few case studies from this type of example on systems, like the example of HS2 and the connectivity that it brings in the different regions and the wider benefits for decarbonization. You have examples from Anglian Water of how the development of some specific assets for water to manage water resources have unlocked different benefits in the wider system on decarbonization, on sources of funding, on benefiting the neighboring businesses to have lower carbon operations such as greenhouses by exporting waste heat and others. But also there are some transport examples. So the message here is that from a systems perspective, it's also equally important to look at opportunities an asset can unlock in the wider system. And if we go to the next one, please. And another dimension the PAS gives on systems, and this links also to the low carbon concrete work. This is about looking at our supply chain as a system and how the mega trends in core materials, especially concrete and steel. This is a snapshot from the low carbon concrete route map that we will hear more this afternoon from, that relies on very global and complex supply chains. How as a system we can make an effort to really accelerate the reductions and achieve deeper reductions in core materials, in carbon for concrete, for steel, for plastics, for petroleum-based products. It's important to look at our supply chains for these core materials that are of essence in all infrastructure and buildings we're building. And it gives some case studies of how, as a supply chain, we can look at those emissions from a systems perspective and focus the efforts that are project agnostic, basically, so we can create the economies of scale and accelerate those products and materials faster. And if you go to the next slide, finally, I would like to summarize by, this is a diagram 2.1 from the guidance document of PAS 2080, and basically what it shows, it's a summary of how the different members of the value chain have a role to play across all stages of delivery, from need to optioneering to design to operation to revisiting need. We don't want to be calling end of life all the time, and how they need to start to really collaborate early into the process to influence the whole life carbon reductions early, where the opportunities are highest. But when we mean by collaboration, through all these examples, especially at systems thinking, it's important to recognize that we really need meaningful collaboration from the beginning. And if this means that we have more innovative procurement models where we just appoint people, let's say, to share their ideas and reward them for those at the beginning before we appoint a designer or a contractor, to look at implications and opportunities at the wider system, either geographical system or the supply chain, then the PAS encourages to do that. And I would like you to also have a look at the PAS City overarching worked example in the guidance document. That is a fictional development which is part of a wider system, and just to see what are the key roles and responsibilities for all these different value chain members you see there in the diagram, that they should be asking, what questions they should be asking, what actions they should be doing from the beginning to maximize those systems benefits. It is a complicated subject, systems thinking. We're seeing only now it has started being applied into more practical examples in the world of infrastructure and buildings, but we need to do way more to achieve those deeper decarbonizations. Yeah. So this is the overview I want to give you from PAS 2080. There is a lot going on, but yeah, feel free to ask any questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I would like to hand over to Beatrice now from HS2. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Beatrice, and today I'm going to be your sector specialist. So first of all, so apologies, I don't have the video or the camera, so it's going to be just guided through the slides and my voice. And today I'm going to explain you how PAS 2080 is embedded in HS2, so what we do and how we do it. So we can go to the next slide, please. And the next slide, thank you. All right, so the previous one, if you don't mind. All right, so the carbon team in HS2 has always been supportive of PAS 2080 since its commencement. HS2 had an active participation in the technical authority panel of the 2016 version, which was the first version of PAS 2080. And HS2 has been PAS 2080 accredited since 2020, when we became the second client organization globally achieving this accreditation. Now we fully embrace the new version 2023 with its new highlights that Maria has already gone through them. So yes, if we go to the next slide, please. Right, so we've already seen this diagram before in Maria's presentation. So I'm showing here the carbon management process diagram from PAS 2080. And in the next slides, what I will follow this diagram explaining how HS2 is implementing these aspects within our program of works and our organization. Next one, please. Okay, so let's start the previous one, if you don't mind. Oh, all right, so let's start with the part of the diagram that speaks about leadership, targets, and baselines. So HS2, via the publication of the Net Zero Carbon Plan in January 2022, publicly announced its commitment to reach net zero. This includes the organization as well as the construction and operation of the services, all the emissions that this includes. This Net Zero Carbon Plan was developed in consultation with the HS2 board, the DFT, as well as other executive bodies and government stakeholders. This plan was not published in isolation. It is backed by a comprehensive set of policies and standards that make sure that we are going to deliver our environmental sustainability vision and that is tangible and achievable. The net zero targets and the actions described in this plan are the result of the commitments from our leadership team towards our responsibility of delivering a sustainable project. And all of this is a proof of our behaviors and leadership and how we are implementing past 2080. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to continue speaking about this net zero carbon plan and its targets in a bit more detail. So if you see on the right hand side of the slide, you have our key targets. So we have committed to become net zero as an organization by 2025. We've also committed to reduce 50% of our emissions. And then our big target is to become net zero of all the scopes, all our emissions by 2035. Also making sure that we are gonna power our trains with zero carbon electricity from day one of operation. And these are the end targets, but to make sure we achieve these, we have a set of interim targets that tackle our areas of high emissions. And this, you can see these on the left-hand side of the slide, where you have this track. So by 2027, we are gonna tackle the emissions from heavy goods vehicle. And then by 2030, we have the target to reduce the emissions from our materials that are our hotspots, which is concrete and the steel materials. Also by 2029, we have a very big target on removing diesel from our construction sites. So additional to all of these targets, the net zero carbon plan that I was mentioning before also includes the list of key areas in which we need to change the way we work to unlock and enable carbon reductions. One of the first tasks consisted in creating a series of local action plans at the team and departmental level. And these local action plans also contribute to engender capability and ownership among these teams and these colleagues who in reality are making the day-to-day decisions that directly affect and influence the carbon emissions. If we go to the next slide, please. So if we continue speaking about engendering ownership and enhancing the creation of the right capability to identify and deliver carbon reductions, we are fully aware that this is not a journey for the HS2 carbon team or HS2. Instead, this vision needs to be shared among all the members of the supply chain, as we've said in other presentations before. Only then this will become possible. So internally, we run climate change and carbon training via the Carbon Literacy Recognized scheme. Thanks to this, the colleagues increase their knowledge and make at least one commitment on reducing emissions in the workplace. Similarly, we disseminate our knowledge, intentions, and ambitions externally. So we work very closely with our fantastic supply chain team to make sure that our supply chain partners and industry peers understand our HS2 carbon commitments and requirements. For example, carbon is included among the frequently asked questions of the HS2 supply chain webpage. And what you can see here in the slide is an image from the supply chain carbon information pack that is externally available. And this was released after a half-day workshop on carbon reduction delivered in July this year. So behavioral change, collaboration, and leadership are fundamental on the net zero journey. If we go to the next slide, please. So if we continue with the flowchart, and if we cover the carbon management, if we cover the next part of this image, the one that is composed by assessment, monitoring, and reporting, procurement, and continual improvement. The procurement documentation in HS2 does include the carbon ambitions before mentioned. The design and the construction delivery contracts do include a target for carbon reduction against which performance is regularly measured. HS2, as an owner, at contract commencement, provides the baseline emission figure to the respective contractors based on the scope of the works. Following the HS2 technical standards, guides, and procedures, life cycle assessments are performed every 6 months with the latest available data from our supply chain. These accounting exercises are performed by experienced practitioners using relevant accounting software. In most of the cases, eTool is the software that we use in HS2. The results are then compared against the baseline figures, obtaining carbon emission percentage reduction, which, as you expect, follow the HS2 relevant reporting governance to fit into the defined internal and external groups. Externally, you can check this data in our annual Environmental Sustainability Progress Report in the appendices. The carbon teams from HS2 and from the supply chain are constantly in touch. We constantly are working together, exploring our challenges and sizing opportunities, trying to expand the benefits from these opportunities across the program and to go beyond so that these stay in the industry. So if we go to the next slide, then we are going to cover the last part of the flowchart that speaks about decarbonization. And I'm going to do this through these two case studies. So what are we doing to reduce our carbon emissions? So in a line joint venture delivering the Colne Valley Viaduct, they are on track to cut the amount of embedded carbon by 28%, which equates to 63,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. They have achieved this by working closely with our rail systems to narrow the structure by over a meter, which has enabled a significant reduction in the amount of concrete and steel needed and associated carbon emissions. They've also significantly reduced the amount of earthworks required for the approach embankment for this structure. The other example, the Thames Valley Viaduct, being delivered by EKFB, is a great example of how our contractors are using the latest engineering techniques to reduce carbon emissions from construction. The design team has simplified the structure of the viaduct so that every major element can be made off-site before being assembled on-site, slotted together like a giant Lego set. And this is cutting the footprint by and is estimated to cut the footprint by 33%. Next slide, please, and we'll touch on the last example that I want to speak about today. And this is about the fabulous progress against our HS2 diesel-free target. So we celebrated our first diesel-free site in May 22. This was Canterbury Road Vent Shaft from SCS. So then, in parallel with the external collaboration we offer to the Construction Leadership Council, we released our diesel-free plan in November 22. So our diesel-free plan, our diesel-free strategy outlines the following principles: to improve efficiency, to use clean electricity, to use cleaner fuels, and to work together to collaborate. And according to the maturity of the different sites on their diesel-free journey, the sites are classified in diamond, silver, gold, or bronze. Currently, we have 19 diesel-free sites, and the target is to achieve all sites to be diesel-free by 2029. So how is this being achieved? This is being achieved with a combination of changing to mains power on 100% renewable energy tariff where possible, and implementing innovations, including retrofit technologies, biofuels, hydrogen, and solar. And if we go to the next slide, I'd like to finish with this slide where you have the links to the Net Zero Carbon Plan, to the supply chain information pack, and also you can sign up to the supply chain bulletin where you will get the latest information of what we are doing and how to contact our supply chain team. And with this, I'm finishing the case study on how HS2 is implementing PAS 2080. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beatrice, and thank you very much, Maria, as well. If you would like to switch your camera on, Maria, no, Beatrice, you've got a few technical difficulties. So a couple of quick questions. I think obviously it was great to hear the focus on the systems thinking aspect of the standard and really the complexity of it. But what Maria are the would you say are the key challenges to the systems thinking approach to decarbonisation?
Claire, there are many challenges. Yeah, basically, how long have you got sort of response? But I would say as a starting point, it's very important to try and understand how our project, being at the asset level, the network level, whatever that may be, how does it fit if we have any targets, how does it fit with the bigger picture when it comes to net zero targets or any decarbonization targets? This is a fundamental question, because so far we're seeing asset owners or developers setting their own asset net zero targets, or 30% reduction, 40% reduction in whatever emissions being capital operational, whatever that may be. But the so what question is always lurking in the background. So, okay, if let's say I reduce my emissions or avoid my emissions by X%, does it actually do the right thing for decarbonizations at the system level? Does it make any difference? We need to really better understand how any project that we are planning to build or develop, how does it fit with a carbon budget at a certain geography that will come eventually, because not all geographies have got carbon budgets yet. But for me, the target piece is quite an important one to start understanding the system before you even start on the opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. And Beatrice, so obviously you're not working in silos in HS2, so you're working with other clients and organisations. So how does that? What's your experience of your view on the key challenges to this approach?
Yes, yes, and it follows totally from what Maria was saying. So of course we don't work in silos. Even like from the inception of our net zero carbon plan, we've always communicated with other arm's length bodies from the Department from Transport to make sure that our ambitions and their ambitions are all of them aligned, going towards the same direction, because we are aware of our position and our responsibility on that front. And yeah, and this is not a solo journey, definitely. So we all need to push towards the right direction. And what is more important is the influence we have. If we send the same message to the supply chain, is more powerful, and then we will also allow them to follow the same direction. And ultimately that can influence the industry and the ways we work and what is available for us to do our day-to-day job, and to change construction, to change transport. So yeah, definitely we are really in touch with other major infrastructure projects and other bodies working for the government.
Okay, thank you, and thank you both. I do need to move on because we're sort of overrunning a little bit, I'm afraid. But thank you both so much. That was really insightful, and thanks so much for speaking today. So moving on to our final session, we're going to be covering low carbon concrete developments. This is still a very new area. I was pleased to be able to contribute to the low carbon concrete route map that was published by the ICE back in spring 22. And that route map, there is a direct line from that to much of the work that we're talking about today, both through the low carbon concrete group and the new flex that we're working on. And one thing I'd also like to just mention before I introduce our speakers is BS 8500 parts 1 and 2, the guidance and specification for concrete. New editions of those have just been published, which now include lower carbon cement. So there's definitely impetus growing in this area. I mean, as well as the wider low carbon materials activity, certainly the aspect of cement and concrete is really developing. So let me introduce the speakers. We have Andy Mulholland, chair of the Low Carbon Concrete Group. He's managing director of Amcrete UK, which provides concrete technology support and advice to the construction industry, alongside being chair and initiator really of a lot of the work on the low carbon concrete route map, and he's chair of the group. He's a chartered construction manager, member of the Institute of Concrete Technology, and he regularly lectures to the Chartered Institute of Buildings. and he'll be followed by Dr. James Aldred, who is a technical author of our Flex 350. James has 40 years experience in the concrete industry. He's technical director of Concrete Future at AECOM, brackets casual, as well as an adjunct associate professor with the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of New South Wales. He's a fellow of the American Concrete Institute and the Institute of Concrete Technology in the UK. We're lucky to have him today. He's calling in from Australia. So I'll hand over first though to Andy, and then if you just hand straight over to James, and we'll have a couple of questions at the end. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good morning, everybody. Just before I do start, I think Claire was underselling herself a little bit. Claire was definitely one of the two driving forces behind the formation of the low carbon concrete group. So much of what we've achieved so far is really down to Claire. I'm hoping my slides work. Okay, low carbon concrete group. As Claire said, I'm chair of this group and have been since its formation. So nothing's happening.
You okay?
Yeah, it keeps muting for some reason. Yeah, so
They move a little bit slowly, I think.
yeah, can everybody hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay. So as chair of the LCCG, I've been fortunate enough to represent the Construction Leadership Council and the Green Construction Board on various seminars and events, as well as consulting to the Climate Group and being technical advisor to Concrete Zero, which is an initiative under the banner of Climate Group, which has a truly global reach. Again, as chair, I've been able to represent both the LCCG and Climate Group at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization for the IDDI, and taken part in various seminars in America twice this year, including Climate Week. And much of the travels results in discussions with different people from different parts of the world. But the one thing that one common theme in all the discussions is this requirement and need for cross-border collaboration, and the LCCG is going to start facilitating that cross-border discussions in order to share knowledge and experience and hopefully accelerate the route to decarbonisation of the concrete sector. But more on that a little bit later. So how did it all start? So at the Bayes Conference Centre on the 8th of January 2020, Claire and Chris Newsom assembled a small number of individuals from the construction industry under the auspices of the Green Construction Board, with the aim of getting together a group of people that can identify what needs to be done and how it can be done in order to achieve the government's targets towards net zero. One of the outcomes of this group was to develop a route map for reducing carbon emissions, but not just a route map, more of a signpost and a how to do the various tasks and meet the challenges and get across the barriers. So that's what we set about doing. So once we started the work within the LCCG, we quickly increased our numbers, And as you can see, there were some significant names of companies and organisations that became involved to lend their expertise, their advice, and to get involved in discussions in order to come up with the route map, with a consensus of agreement. We've highlighted in green some of the significant names in there, such as the Green Construction Board, the Concrete Centre, BRE Group, Environment Agency, BSI, Mineral Products Association, CEMEX. So you can see from the list that's in front of you now, which isn't the full list as it is today, that this isn't just a group of people getting together that have concerns. This is actually the industry, people from the cement manufacturing industry, people from the concrete industry that are coming together in order to meet the challenges. So in April 2022, after 2 years of work, the ICE supported the publication and the launch of the Green Construction Board's low carbon concrete route map. And this publication has become recognised worldwide. So whenever I go overseas, people do talk to me and they provide comments and references to this publication. So we are of the view that the route map has become an authoritative document and people are using it and indeed including it within their businesses' policies. The route map itself does set out 85 key action areas that we need to address and overcome, and the LCCG is now facilitating action on those key action areas. It's not my keyboard working. So work streams being developed from the route map are work stream 1, the Concrete Decarbonisation Task Force, work stream 2, procurement, work stream 3, flex standard, 4 is the optimisation and improvement of BS8 500 part 1, work stream 5 is the LCCG Concrete Zero continued benchmarking, work stream 6, the GGBS question, work stream 11, a very important one, risk management for the insurance sector and warranties, and work stream 12, gap analysis. And we'll talk about these in a bit more detail. So work stream 2, procurement. So this work stream is due to kick off early 2024 to enable the gathering of different strategies that are out there for businesses and projects in order to procure lower carbon technologies. From this, we should be able to understand what type of concrete elements can be constructed with different types of cement and different concrete types, different strength classes, which will provide the overall project solutions in order to meet various targets, whether they be business targets, project targets, or indeed government targets. Something we're keen to understand from procurement is what is available within each region. It's fair to say that within the M25 and London in particular has a wealth of options available to various projects in order to procure lower carbon technologies. Well, that may not be necessarily the same as you go outside of the M25, particularly if you start working in rural areas. So we need to collect data in order for the procurement specialist to look at lower carbon technologies. And that's the type of data that we need to understand in order to focus efforts and even indeed funding in other areas in order to provide an equal and level playing field for projects and businesses in terms of procuring lower carbon technologies. So workstream 3, the Flex 350. James is going to discuss this in a bit more detail. But one of the things that the LCCG did at the beginning was carry out a survey to try and understand what the what everybody thought were barriers towards the adoption of lower carbon technologies. One of those perceived barriers was standards, and standards did not necessarily support the use of alternative binder systems. So we went to the industry, we asked them to contribute, provide funding in order to develop a new Flex 350. The industry reacted very positively. We were funded to the maximum that we needed and a bit more, and we started the Flex 350 work. James very kindly took up the offer for being the lead technical author. We assembled an advisory group, which was made up of members of the construction industry, including the cement and concrete world, and we started drafting version 1 of the Flex 350. Version 1 has since been out for public consultation. That period has now been completed, and in January 2024, we shall be reviewing those comments from the first version and then issuing a version 2, probably beginning of Q2 of 2024. The Flex 350 is supported by members of the advisory group, and there's a list there that you can see of those who are on that advisory group. But it also has strong links to existing key committees, so the cement and concrete technical committees. So what we can say is that what goes into the Flex 350 has been reviewed, and we can consider the Flex 350 as an authoritative document towards specifying lower carbon technologies. It's also the case now that early in 2024, we are likely to make an application to BSI for the work being carried out in the Flex 350 to form part of BS 8500 Part 3. So that will be a significant step in bringing lower carbon technologies to the table of specifiers. So workstream 4, BS 8500 Parts 1 and 2, as Claire has very briefly touched on, that work has been completed, and the revised 8500 will be out fairly soon, and it now includes lower carbon cements, albeit with Portland cement as the main activator, but it's the new cement type, SM6, which offers the customer a lower carbon cement type to be used in general applications, as we would do with our traditional cement blends. The hope is that these SM6 cements will become just as popular as the traditional cement blends, but the consequence of SM6 is it will reduce the reliance on GGBS to reduce the carbon intensity of a cubic meter of concrete. It will reduce the Portland cement content and offer a reduction in share of the traditional blends of cement. Workstream 5, continuous benchmarking. So the question is, what constitutes a low or a lower carbon concrete? Well, we need to understand what is the intensity, what is the carbon intensity of our concrete. So the LCCG developed the benchmark, where we were able to collect a lot of data from the industry and set the carbon benchmarks in bandings across different strength classes. We're now into the second iteration of the benchmark, which you can see on the left-hand side, which allows projects to plot the carbon intensity of the concrete that's being used, so the market available concrete that's being used on a project, and give it a carbon rating. The graph that you see on the right-hand side, this is the benchmark as developed by Arup as a consequence of the LCCG work. This benchmark is more aimed at policies for businesses and governments to set policies and provides a similar type of banding. The ARUP benchmark is static, so that will remain as is, whereas the benchmark on the left-hand side, the LCCG benchmark, is dynamic. Each year, the plan is to, what's happening here? But each year, the plan is to collect more data from the industry. That data will be assessed, and the benchmark year on year will be re-evaluated and reset, which will lead to a reset of project ambitions. And hopefully, we should see a decline in carbon intensity in line with the benchmark. And in order to do that, we're developing a method to collect carbon data, concrete consumption, strength class, including a QA module, which will help us determine what the carbon intensity is against actual strength gained on site. And all that type of data should lead then into future revisions of BS8 500 with the hope of reducing the minimum cement contents. That data will be collected by way of the CMAR tool, the Carbon Measurement Assessment and Reporting tool. We feel that the best source of information is not necessarily from the concrete producers, but actually from those who are purchasing concrete, so your contractors on site, because they know exactly what strength class they require, they know exactly where the concrete is going, which elements. We can determine how much concrete is being wasted due to what's being ordered, what's been designed, what's being placed. The contractors looking after the QA, the quality assurance of the concrete, so that helps us determine the cement content in relation to the actual strength gained. So that type of data feeds back into the benchmark, feeds back into the technical committees, and then hopefully we can reduce minimum cement content for modern concrete or modern cement technology. The CMAR tool allows all the contractors and the projects to report to internally or externally on how well and accurately the project is achieving any targets that are set against it. It's key to understand the different types of concrete elements that we are constructing, because some have a requirement due to the mechanical performance of that concrete element or the exposure conditions, and they all have a bearing on the types of cements that can be used and the types of blends that can be used. And again, that is then related to the strength of the concrete. So we need to a deep dive into the data. What type of concrete elements are being used and what types of cements and concretes are being used to build them. What is the intensity of each of those concrete elements? That helps designers to assess that information and then look at future projects, learn from previous projects, and then with a degree of confidence, reduce the carbon again associated with concrete works for the next project. So we're always learning. And we're able to measure, assess and report, reset the ambition, and then go again. So work stream 6, the GGBS question. So many people think that GGBS is a constrained material and we're using too much of it, or we're using it for the wrong reasons. Other people think completely the opposite. So the LCCG and climate group Concrete Zero set about investigating the efficient use of GGBS in reducing global emissions. The paper is about 12 pages long, has a lot of data inside there, but one thing about the GGBS question is it does split opinion, probably depending on what role you have in the industry and certainly what region you are working in. So even though the paper has been published, it will certainly need a revision as information changes and we become much more knowledgeable about other regions and the availability of GGBS. One recommendation from the paper, though, is the urgent need for funding into other technologies. Workstream 11, so risk management. So this workstream started about 2 months ago. So one of the other barriers that was identified very early on in the life of the LCCG was the perception that the insurance sector was stunting the opportunity to adopt lower carbon technologies based on unknown risks. That perception was fueled by probably lack of historical evidence of use of lower carbon technologies. It was certainly fueled by a lack of understanding how to navigate existing codes and standards such as Eurocode. And it's certainly the case that the existing suite of codes and standards do provide a route for a structural engineer to assess the suitability and fit for purpose of a non-code compliant cement type. But it comes down to knowledge and experience and confidence in being able to navigate through these standards and being able to assess the technical information that is being presented to support the specification of a cement type that may not necessarily sit in existing codes or standards such as EN 1971. So we've begun the work. We're talking with the insurance sector, and the good news is that the insurance sector has come to the party. It is taking an active role in developing this work stream. We have a live event in May next year. It's going to be geared towards a global reach. The industry sector has recognised that that it is seen as a real and genuine barrier, and it's started to move to remove that perception of itself. So the insurance sector is working alongside the construction industry in order to develop guidance documents and authoritative guidance documents, and it may well result in the formation of a technical committee, establishing a technical committee to help the insurance sector understand the intricacies and complexities of cement chemistry and concrete technology. Excuse me. So they're the live work streams we have going at the moment. We believe we are making a positive influence on the industry. We are affecting change, but there's still a lot more work to do. And if anybody wishes to be part of the LCCG, then all you have to do is contact BSI or contact me direct, and we welcome your contributions to the LCCG. Thank you very much.
Right, yes, let me introduce Dr. James Aldred. James, are you there? Great stuff, thanks so much. Not sure the sound's quite working at the moment. Can you hear me, James? Looks like we have a slight problem Andy, while we're waiting for James, I did have a quick question which you might be able to just comment on, if that's okay. So thank you. That was really interesting. And gosh, that's good to see all that development, so much development going on with the LCCG. Are we thinking is there going to be sort of verification and compliance around well, the flex and some of the work that you're doing? So are we going to be looking at towards certification of products that are being developed in this area?
Sorry, say that again, Claire.
Are you do you see the verification of compliance specification of products developing in this area? It's a question around the certification, really, I think.
Right, certification. So in
the lower carbon concrete materials, yeah.
Yeah, so we actually spoke with BSI a few weeks back when we co-hosted the delegates from the UAE. So we are beginning, well, it looks like there's going to be some discussions about potentially BSI looking into offering some form of certification to declare a given mix design is actually lower carbon. But we need to understand how we measure that and being able to declare that. That could, in essence, replace the need for an EPD, although that's probably quite some way off and requires some detailed discussion. But the Flex 350 itself, it would be in itself a much more robust document than the existing PAS 8820. In fact, that PAS 8820 will be withdrawn as soon as Flex 350 work is complete. But the good news is that if we make the application early 2024 to BSI to make a revision to 8500 Part 3, we will then start to introduce a performance standard towards and concrete rather than a prescriptive standard, which predominantly is what 8500 is.
Right, yes. Yeah, because it is a highly controlled area in terms of certification and all the CE marking and so on. So is there do we have any news on James at the moment? I'm looking in the chat. I can't quite see what's happening there. We are sort of almost out of time as well. Let's see if I've got anything from the conference organisers. Sorry, leaving you on camera there on your own, Andy. Sorry about that. I'm thinking. Oh, hi, James. Oh, gone again.
Cement chemistry is improving, but I'm not sure about digital technology.
Absolutely not. Well, that was all in terms of the questions. So, and I'm thinking I may have to close the session. Yeah, I think I am unfortunately going to have to close the session. What I will do, I will actually talk to the conferences team and see if we can't have perhaps a separate session which would be available on demand with James. That certainly is sometimes possible. We did a separate Q&A session recently, which is then available on demand. So it's not a live version, but we might be able to, I will have a word and see if we can do something like that. So at least I'm getting a message, we can include a recorded session for James. So that's good. So anyone who's registered or attended today, if we can organise that, that will be available, and we'll make it available to you. So thank you so much, Andy, and thank you to all our speakers today. Don't forget, there are further events this afternoon, tomorrow morning, and tomorrow afternoon. I think I did ask for have we got yes, we have it there. Excellent. Thanks very much for flagging that up for everyone. Just a brief reminder on what's happening in the next couple of days. Please do tune in. And thanks very much for attending. And thank you again, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.